Hello and welcome. My name's Andy Reid. I'm the director of the Sports Think Tank, and today we're joining one of the 29 organisations that have helped us in our 2024 manifesto project. We were challenged to come up with policy ideas for a new government after the next election, which would probably not have great resource implications. As we all know, the economy and the public finances are in a position where spending is going to be very difficult for the next period. So these individual organisations have come together. We've created the pamphlet, which is available on our website, but we wanted to give each of the contributors a little bit more time to expand on what they're trying to say in their chapter. So let's head over to the next one in this series of this Sports Think Tank 2024 manifesto. Joined by Jenny Patrickson from Active IQ, one of the contributors to the pamphlet and the document. So welcome, Jenny. Great to have you here today. As you know, we just want to sort of talk through really the contribution you've made and where it sort of fits in. But more importantly, probably quite a lot of the listeners and viewers would like to probably know a little bit about you and, of course, about Active IQ. So, yeah, just a real opportunity, I suppose, to talk about your journey into sport and physical activity and a little bit more about Active IQ itself.
Yeah, pleasure, and good to be here. Thanks for inviting me. So if I start with Active IQ, Active IQ is an awarding organisation. So we develop specialist health and fitness related qualifications for the sector. We had our 20th birthday last year, so we've been around 20 years. And we develop qualifications. We quality assure the delivery of those qualifications because we have around 500 approved centres. And then we obviously certificate achievement for learners who've been successful. And we've got around 100 qualifications, and they range from entry level through to level 4. Obviously, key to those qualifications are fitness professionals and personal trainers, leisure team members. So all very much sector based, but quite holistic in that it's not all about fitness, it's about wellness as well.
Yeah.
So 20 last year. I joined Active IQ 10 years ago. Prior to that, I worked for another organisation, award organisation, still in the sector. So I've always been in awarding from a physical activity sector perspective. But prior to that, I was involved with organisations that train people to be fitness professionals. So I've been involved in that for probably about 35 years. I originally came from not a sports background, but a dance background. And I moved into the world of fitness when I gave up dancing, which a lot of people did at that time. And after teaching group exercise classes for some time, I retrained, did a degree in education, did some fitness and sport education at Bristol University also, and moved into the world of teaching and training trainers. So got a background in awarding and certification and quality assurance, but also in the delivery of qualifications as well. And also at the coalface in terms of teaching people and leading people through physical activity programs from way back.
Wow, that's a great sort of segue into the journey. And actually, one of the great things about just chatting is it sort of throws up things that I've not really thought about. But you mentioned there a little bit about this is, a lot of your qualifications, you've got 100 different sort of things going on there. They're not all about, there is a traditional view, isn't there, about the sort of the PT and fitness. And clearly what we want to talk about here is that more well-being and wellness sort of stuff. So I assume a lot of yours those areas as well, because that skill set has had to change over this period, hasn't it? From sort of like pure coaching and teaching to really working with different groups. So it'd be quite interesting just to pick out that, Jenny, and your journey on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, the obvious ones, the level 2 gym instructor, group X instructor, and level 3 personal trainer. But we have a lot of wraparound qualifications. We have entry level qualifications that enable people to move into those roles. And actually some of those entry level qualifications are delivered in colleges and schools, but also in prisons and young offenders institutes. But we've got a lot of wellness qualifications as well. So mental health awareness, smoking cessation, alcohol cessation, and leading community exercise, outdoor activity exercise. So it's very holistic in that we don't just focus on the fitness side of things.
Yeah, that's quite important, isn't it? Because if we're trying to move into those other, trying to get this document shows, trying to sort of work with other parts of the ecosystem of government, systems thinking, then clearly they're not just wanting to drive people into sort of gym instructors, and those other skill sets are really important.
Lots of progression. Lots of progression
Yeah,
opportunities as well, because we have level 3, level 4 qualifications that industry professionals can progress onto and expand on their skills, and
yeah.
deal with a broader range of the population because of that.
Yeah, yeah, and again, you've probably seen through this pamphlet a lot of work the sector's been doing over the last few years. That drive to tackle inequalities means we are working with sort of new groups of people that traditionally have been excluded. So I suppose that brings a different set of
Mm.
not just not challenges, that's the wrong way of putting it, but a different set of opportunities for people to work in a different way.
Yeah, yeah.
And is that reflected in the qualifications, or is that just more on the sort of we often use that word soft skills, which is sort of the wrong way of putting it, but people understand that a little bit. So much of that is around understanding the person, coach, sort
Yeah.
of individually coach centered sort of stuff.
Definitely. I mean, the qualifications have changed over the years. Obviously, there's content in qualifications that doesn't change that much, anatomy, physiology, kinesiology. But definitely over the years, the demand and the need from operators and employers and obviously the public in terms of those soft skills and communication methods and engaging
Yeah.
people to change their behaviour, and change their lifestyle through physical activity. So the qualifications very much reflect that. What we do is we develop qualifications based on occupational standards. So we use CIMSPA's occupational standards, the Chartered Institute for Management, Sport, Physical Activity, and those standards have that breadth of content around communication and the softer skills with individuals as well.
And I suppose this is really obvious to you, but I suppose in one sense, a qualified workforce. Why is it so important to the sector? I mean, your chapter sort of pulls out on some of this, but it's just worth re-emphasising, isn't it? Because it's a little bit.
Yeah,
The things we've taken here are those sort of backbones to the sector. Everyone's very keen to get out there and talk to other people, but putting in place a structured backbone so that we are qualified and we've got a decent workforce and it's there's other governance in place. But is it just worth spelling out why it is important to us that we have a
yes,
qualified, well
absolutely.
qualified
And
workforce?
I think you could take it back to COVID and the pandemic and when gyms and leisure centres were closed, and how people missed the interaction, not just with their peers and individuals that they'd be being active and exercising with, but those who were leading exercise programs. We could have all done things online and at home and outside and in the garden, but people miss people. And I think there was some research after COVID that really highlighted the need for that interaction with humans in a face-to-face context for being active. And some people are great at being active alone, but many people aren't, and they need that encouragement and motivation from others. And I think everybody would confirm that, from a going to a gym or going to a leisure centre, having a motivating individual who understands and can relate to what you're trying to achieve to encourage you to exercise and to continue that exercise. That's the hardest thing, isn't it? Not drop out
Yes.
is vital.
Yeah.
So we certainly have had feedback since the pandemic about how important the workforce is, not just for the technical aspects of leading people through physical activity programs, but the communication and engagement and motivation for individuals and communities.
And I suppose from the sector's point of view, I think you touch on in your contribution is that there are some perceptions around workforce development and sort of opportunities in the sector as well. So I suppose from my point of view, with my economic development hat on, the more you can build a qualified and a progressive sort of workforce where there is potential to grow and build yourself within the sector without having to go in and out is quite important as well.
Mm.
And I suppose just from a leadership perspective, it is quite important that we have these qualifications and a qualified workforce to allow long-term planning. And you highlight the issue
Yeah.
of staff shortages. I hear it all the time at the moment. Is recruitment
Yes,
problems.
and that is the particular problem at the moment. The health and fitness sector is growing, but the
Mm,
demand for the workforce can't keep up with that growth. And we're hearing from gyms and leisure centres that over 40% don't have the relevant staff with the right skills, knowledge, and competence in place to work with their communities and individuals. And we certainly, as an awarding organisation, because obviously we can track registrations, not just for ourselves, but other awarding organisations as well through Ofqual's qualification statistics. And you can see the tracking of certifications that has gone down since the pandemic. So there's a real difficulty at the moment in attracting people into the industry. Training providers are finding it harder to get those potential graduate students on their programs, and that's a problem. We know that there is a shortage of swimming teachers, and that's not particularly my area, but there's also a shortage of fitness professionals, physical activity professionals. And one of the things we've talked about for some time is how we collectively as a sector and with government support can campaign for making our sector more attractive as an opportunity for individuals to come into, either as a first-time job or a change of career, so that they can actually see it as a really attractive proposition to make their career journey within.
And so, what do you think it is at the moment that it does create that barrier? Because clearly, it's quite a young workforce at that sort of in those entry points, and quite rightly so. And it looks quite an attractive if you enjoy this sort of area of work. It can look quite attractive. So, what are the barriers that do put people off? It is hours and pay and sort of some of those working conditions.
Well, just on the sort of workforce and the demographic, young in many respects, and that can be a good thing, a really positive thing, but also people engaging exercise, if they're older like me, they don't necessarily want a physical activity instructor who's 18 or 19. You might want someone who's more of a peer. So there's various factors. I mean, over the years, funding for qualifications has been reduced year after year after year, and certainly for adult education, it doesn't really exist. It's there more for the younger demographic. It's there for apprenticeships, and it's there for some vocational technical qualifications. So one, for an adult changing career, if they don't have the funds to do that, there's no funded option to enable them to change career. But then for individuals coming into the sector from a younger age, again, it's all about funded qualifications and what colleges and what funded private training providers can offer with a lack of funding for qualifications. And we gave an example in the pamphlet around the National Skills Fund, which is around meeting the needs of current and emerging skills, but it doesn't include sport and physical activity. So that's a perfect example of how, if that programme was expanded, it may help attract people into the sector. But certainly pay and remuneration is an issue. It's not the highest paid sector to come into for those entry-level jobs, but it is attractive in that people who have an affinity to working with people and helping people, there's a great opportunity in there for people who want to work with others and with communities, and it's up to us as a sector and the government support to help us attract those people to us.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, you're great at this because you sort of segue straight into that sort of little piece, because you did rise to the challenge that we set people, which is, what are the regulatory, it might come with funding, but it's funding that's already there. It just needs to extend to our sector. But, you did come up with some of those little regulatory or sort of policy changes that would make a big difference to us. And that, what you just talked about there, is just a key part of that, isn't it? Is that if government could just extend to include our own sector. And I know that's happened numerous times over the last few years. So just before we started, I sort of asked, what, in your experience, what are the excuses that government give for not including us? We tend to get sort of excluded from quite a lot of government programmes, and you probably obviously lobby in this particular area with the different people to those I do in DCMS. And so what is it? What's the messages that you get back from them that says, sorry, you're 15th on the list out of 13 sort of sectors?
Yes, I think it's just not seen as a priority. When you look at other skills needs and digital and tech and industry, we're not seen as a priority. But, I think we'd all agree it's an oversight in that if you think about prevention to disease and how we can improve the quality of people's lives through physical activity, the costs of the NHS, over 60% people either overweight or living with obesity, over a quarter of people physically inactive. Just more to get people active, which our workforce can absolutely support with, will do amazing things for the economy. And it's just that, looking at fixes rather than prevention. What do we need now, but not having the time and attention to look at how we can prevent issues in the future. There's a lot of good work going on in terms of discussion with government and linked to the health sector from UK Active, our trade association. But I still think that, there's much to be done in terms of understanding the benefits of our workforce and how we can contribute to the economy.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. You possibly know, but I sit with other hats on, so I chair my local enterprise partnership, and I do find it quite interesting sometimes when I talk about sport, physical activity, and well-being. Business leaders just aren't quite there yet. There are other priorities, and it's the same, I suppose, in just general. Had some stuff this week where trying to lobby government or ministers and MPs about something like this, when there is the situation in Gaza, the situation internationally in
Mm.
Ukraine, the cost of
Yeah.
living crisis, housing crisis. I suppose our job is to make this more than it's just a nice to do. This is pretty fundamental to all, part solution, not the total solution, but part solution to many of those other problems that business leaders are sort of suffering from. And I suppose we've just got to find the right mechanism and wording to convince people of its importance. It's not just a nice to do afterwards, is it? And I don't know whether,
Yeah,
in
just a
your
nice to
sector,
have.
yeah, you come across employers more often than business leaders, I assume. So is there
Yeah.
any key messages you think have worked?
Um, Definitely in terms of the breadth of the qualifications. I mean, in the past, the qualifications were more fitness oriented,
Yes.
and everybody understands now that it's the wellness message and it's the
Yeah.
bigger piece we have to get across. And I think the whole of the industry at the moment, the whole of the sector is very focused on how we're much more inclusive and I don't in so many respects, but we're not just dealing with people's fitness, we're dealing with
Yeah.
people's mental and physical well-being, and
Yeah.
so everybody's working towards that same goal at the moment. But I mean, the problem for us as things stand is when you develop qualifications. We've just been going through a government reform program for level 2 and level 3 qualifications, and whilst there's much weight for getting employer involvement, what do employers need? What is the knowledge that's missing, the skills that are missing that we need to get into our qualifications as we redevelop them? There's a lot of emphasis on that. However, the time to develop those reformed qualifications, the structure that you have to fit in, is very restrictive and lacks flexibility. So the programme we're going through at the moment started last January. Approval for those qualifications will come through this summer, but they won't be able to be delivered until next summer, 25. So we were gathering feedback from employers at the beginning of last year and through the year, but by 2025, the employers could argue, well, hang on, this is out of date now, we need this now. So we need the system to be much more responsive and
Yeah.
flexible and dynamic.
Yeah. I don't know if you've got a skill, Jenny, of sort of reading my mind, but as we were talking about that, you then mentioned mental health, and I just wondered, in terms of your qualifications, given the fact that we're just able to talk about mental health now, as well as in the same breadth as physical well-being,
Mm.
have you been able to sort of? You can probably just expand a little bit what you've just sort of said, really, isn't it? Is that build into those qualifications what that looks like for an individual skill set, because that would be very different to 10 or 15 years ago, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. I think, well, we've developed an independent, separate mental health awareness qualification, mental health first aid. My wish would be that that content be subsumed within a broader fitness qualification as it stands, so that everybody has that. It's touched upon in most qualifications, but the weighting of that doesn't have a significant amount of time. It's a separate qualification in itself. But that's to do with updating occupational standards and us redeveloping qualifications around those updated standards. But it's certainly something that the physical activity sector has become very focused on, one for the customers and individuals that they're working with, but for their own workforce as well, who are
Yeah.
under pressure from low pay, long hours, and their
Yeah.
own stresses and strains of life. But it's certainly a broader piece now. I'd like to see it embedded in most of the core qualifications moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good idea, isn't it? Because too often there's this debate about how specialist sort of knowledge and individuals responsible, but we all need to be picking up on signs and to probably understand the right language and the right way to approach some of these issues, don't we? Not every person who's totally qualified is always going to be in front of the individual that probably needs additional assistance. So yeah,
And I
that's
think the
that
key thing with that is,
crucial.
yeah, and encouraging people once they've done a qualification, it's not the end of the journey, it's the start of the journey.
Mm,
So they might become a fitness professional, but what else can they, should they do to broaden their skills? And sometimes that's a
yeah,
tricky area because it's who has the responsibility for that ongoing learning. Is
yeah,
it the individual, if they're self employed? Is it
yes.
the employer? Are the employers involved with supporting and upskilling their workforce beyond the basic qualifications? And that's a lot of conversations we have with employers are, what is it you need in terms of CPD? How can we make it more cost effective? How can we encourage people to keep on learning and not just do one thing and think that that's the end of the line?
And again, that you sort of led in quite sort of nicely. So in terms of employers, I mean, clearly, if we've got these problems of low pay and the long hours, etc., then clearly the sector is trying to deal with those. In your experience of working, with sort of just there are sports businesses as well as these whole sort of sector groups and local authorities. I assume a lot of the staff are sitting in those. Both that mental health within the organisations themselves, the qualifications will help on that. But actually, in terms of those other sort of pieces, are you able to assist them really, I suppose, in a systems thinking approach to try and improve a lot of the workforce? When I know, talking to some people this week, the new national minimum wages have a massive impact on budgets. I mean, there's been energy cost
Mm.
rises in the recent past. So it is a very, very difficult squeezed time for lots of organisations.
Yeah.
But there are other things you can do as an employer, aren't they, to improve the sort of the workforce and their understanding of where they fit in all of this. So are there things you can help
Yeah.
them with because with all the monitoring that you do?
Well, we did, yes, and you're right. It's budgets and where the budgets first go
Yeah,
when people are struggling with the
yeah,
cost of swimming pools and leisure centres, etc.
yeah,
CPD,
yeah.
sometimes that budget is the last to be focused on, but
Mm,
it doesn't have to be expensive. I mean, we try and work with employers to look at what their needs are and tailor our qualifications and our CPD around that. We started offering a Skills Hub CPD platform back in the pandemic, free of charge to our centres, and then opened it up to the wider operator environment so that people had CPD they could access. That's cost effective and quick and easy to do. But as anyone would say, on YouTube nowadays, there's tons and tons of free learning that people can do. It's just finding the right content. So
yes.
I'm not advising that everybody goes to YouTube and tries to wade their way through what's appropriate and what's not. But there's definitely cost-effective ways of CPD. We don't just offer qualifications; we offer unregulated program CPD as well. And when it's bite-sized learning chunks, you can certainly build it into budgets if you work with employers and understand their needs and what they have available from year to year.
And so there's two things that jump out of that. First of all, you're entirely right. Whilst we're recording this, my wife is doing a Zumba class in the back of the house off on YouTube. So I don't know how well
Yeah,
qualified the individual is. I mean, it's just difficult. But is this the stuff we could do? It leads into the sort of discussion around, I suppose, the role of Simspa and yourself. Is that unregulated, the whole world, COVID world, did open up that unregulated world where people just set themselves up with an iPhone and off you go. So how do we know as an individual consumer, what are we looking for when we're looking for a sort of a qualified PT? If they've done I've
yeah.
seen in the past, I don't know how you feel about this, but those short courses that you can buy off on Instagram to make yourself a PT in I don't know
Mm,
how many hours,
mm,
call yourself
mm.
qualified, etc. So can be confusing a
Yeah,
consumer, isn't it? And what do we need to
yeah,
ask? What do we need to look for?
yeah. There's a lot of cowboys out there in
Mm,
terms of that, and I think in terms of a qualification, people should be looking for a regulated qualification
yeah,
by a well-respected awarding organisation,
yeah,
and also are they linked to the occupational standards that currently exist that SIMSPA create? So we ourselves ran a campaign last year about how to look for
mm,
quality providers, how to look for an appropriate regulated qualification. So whilst we talk about unregulated programs, it might work for bite-sized CPD and learning, but for your basic entry to sector qualifications and key progression opportunities within the sector, people should be looking for that stamp, an off-qual regulated qualification with a well-respected awarding organisation. And ideally endorsed by CIMSPA as well, who develop those occupational standards. And people absolutely do need to do their homework and understand what those courses look like. And if it looks really short and if it looks really cheap, the chances are it's not going to be that great, because you can't build in any kind of wraparound, even if you're trying to offer a blended learning program, which is partly online, partly face-to-face. You can't offer any quality wraparound support if it's too short and too cheap. It doesn't pay for any resource.
Yeah. Actually, Jenny, what we'll probably do is we'll get the link to that campaign that you've done around making it easy, because actually for consumers, we'll put a link in the podcast, but also probably on the website, because it is important, is it, as consumers, we take the lead in asking those questions. Otherwise, those with very little qualification, operating, making nice money out of it, why would they want to do it properly? So yeah, it's down to us in a way, isn't it? Well, that's
absolutely
done.
You don't want poor people having to spend loads of money and then realise it's for nothing. It's our job as the sector to guide people to the right path.
Yeah. Just going back a little bit, again, this sort of leads into that. So I was just trying to think about people who do want to start looking, and you mentioned at the beginning, but just the profile, as we've got an ageing population, I think you quite rightly pointed out, not everybody. I mean, I don't mind being coached by, I play my rugby, and I don't mind being shouted at by some 25, 30-year-old coach, because they do know more than me, and it sort of goes with the territory. But I can imagine as I get a bit older, I would like people who look and feel like me and understand probably how much it hurts when you're a bit older to do these things, and how difficult they are. It is a strange world, isn't it, as you get older, the things that slow down and bits that don't work like they used to. But how do we attract? Because, if you look at the numbers of people who are going to be over 100 in 30 years' time, and look at the numbers of those over 65 already, proportionally it's growing. Quite often they're long-term health conditions, a large proportion of those. Lots will be very physically active and fit already. But as you said at the beginning, it's a different dynamic and a different demographic we're going to be working with, isn't it? So is there a drive to attract sort of more older people back in to the workforce, even on a part-time basis, to assist with this? Do the qualifications need to be amended even further as we sort of move forwards to be looking after those long-term health conditions as well as mental health? Sorry, it's a very long-winded way of saying how to get old people in.
No, that's fine. Well, there is, so currently there's a qualification in working with individuals with long-term conditions, which, as we know, affects many of the population. So they are more the normal population that we are all dealing with now. So that's a qualification that people can progress on to from, let's say, a level 3 personal training qualification. That's why it's so important for, if people are going into a personal training role as a job, as a profession, that they don't stop there, because they need that breadth of understanding of all the different conditions and how to deal with those. So that's the first thing. The qualifications can work for anyone, whatever age they are going into them. I certainly, conversations we've had with UK Active are around how could we attract the 50 plus market into our sector, who can empathise and can work and understand people of an older age category. I'm over 50, so I'm not calling us older, but that more mature age group. So it's something that we have an aspiration to do, but it comes back to campaigns to get people to join our sector. And I strongly think, think back to Sport England's This Girl Can campaign, that kind of campaign to attract people to our sector. What are the benefits from it, but also from all demographics? So if you're looking at changing your lifestyle, retiring, doing something completely different, doing something part-time, these are the opportunities that you could find yourself able to access. So it's all about campaign, and I would love to see a funded campaign around how we get a wide range of demographic individual into our sector.
No, I have sympathy with Jenny. I hit 60 this year, so I don't regard myself as old when I'm talking. So old is just been redefined, isn't it? There is
absolutely
social service, social work around this, around what we live in an ageless society. So I don't think we can't do demographics and age by decade anymore. It's quite often physical condition of the individual. And as you say, there are 2 to 3, 2 to 7 million, depends how you measure it, but people with long-term health conditions. So this is not just a marginal problem, and many of those who are unable to work are in that 2 million people on sickness benefits who possibly do want to work if they could get their conditions right. So
Yeah,
that's where the business case sort of comes in a little bit, isn't it? As we can help people back to a level of
absolutely.
sort of wellness, not fitness, wellness. But also, you just also touched on the demographics of the workforce in terms of diversity and inclusion. I mean, where are we as a sector on that particular issue? There's been a great deal of emphasis across the board on inclusivity and diversity. And I just wonder where
Mm.
what progress have we made in sort of the workforce, in particular that front line?
Yeah, it's an interesting one
Mm.
in that I know UK Active have just started to offer a questionnaire and a tool to operators to really enable them to assess where they stand in terms of their workforce
Yes.
and whether
Yeah.
they are absolutely considering all everything they should in terms of quality, diversity, inclusion. So that's quite a recent thing.
Mm.
From a qualification perspective, every qualification that we design has to have EDI in mind and are open and accessible to everyone, obviously. But it's how that's reflected by people who are bringing on individuals onto program and workforce as well. But I
Yeah.
think there's more work to be done there, and I think it's very good that UK Active are providing that tool to enable people to really assess where are we with this, what
Yeah.
more do we need to do.
Yeah.
I think that's essential.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. If you don't even know what your workforce looks like, you don't have the basic understanding of where to move to, do you? And increasingly,
Yeah,
in all of these demographics, sometimes people, like you said, with this girl can, that worked because people saw people like themselves. People need
yes,
to see people
yeah,
like themselves doing sort of stuff, and so it is important our workforce sort of reflects the communities in which we wish to serve, and
yeah.
so that probably is a bit of a challenge that we're probably a little bit behind the curve on that one, isn't it? And hopefully make some progress on that. Jenny, you've sort of really given us a good flavour, really, of the importance of the sort of qualifications and the workforce. Your chapter is brilliant at just sort of pulling out exactly what we needed, just a few key, we've called them marginal gains, really, isn't it? So if you could just alter something marginally, you could then probably make quite a big difference. And I just like this idea of speeding up the process, obviously sort of including us in other government initiatives and things. Before we sort of close and move on, is there anything else that you wish you'd put in the pamphlet, or is there anything after the discussion, sort of, we've just brief discussion our little half hour today? Is there anything else that sort of pops into your head and you think, well, okay, yeah, there's some other things we can do as we move forward?
I think it's about the opportunities that are available and career pathways that do
Yeah,
exist within the sector. I think
yeah,
many people still think along the line it's just about gym instructing, it's just
yeah,
about personal training.
yeah.
But if I go back to the beginning of our discussion and I relate it to my own career pathway, I joined the sector as a Group X instructor. I became a trainer of trainers. I became a writer of curriculum. I became an assessor and a quality assurer, then moved into the world of awarding and worked my way up through that journey to where I am now. So there is this career pathway that you don't necessarily know exists and anticipate, but which can happen organically. I think we probably, if there's anything to add, is about how we show those career pathways and what support we could have for demonstrating those career pathways along the need to campaign for people to come and join us. I think that could be a lot clearer. And certainly everybody's trying to do that work. CIMSPA is, we are, other rewarding organisations, but anything we can do to shine a light on, you can get a really rewarding career out of coming into this world, then that would be fantastic.
Yeah, that's a really good point, isn't it? Because too often, I suppose, the workforce that people interact with are those on the immediate front line, and there's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes that yeah, they need to highlight those career opportunities, don't they? Or we all
Yeah.
do. That's part of what we could do here as well, just to really push that, and probably need more leaders like yourselves telling your journey. How many chief execs of organisations have I met that tell me they started off as a lifeguard
Yeah.
or something? I think it seems like everyone I've met in the sector seems to have definitely done lifeguard duties as a
That's one
starting.
thing I never did do, lifeguarding.
No, I haven't. I'm not actually that very good at swimming, which is,
No,
but
me neither.
or dancing. I'm sorry to say, Jenny. Although my Christmas present to my wife this year was for me to take dance lessons to finally get up, because I know the movement and dance sort of organisers when I was at at Sport and Recreation Lines, we're very keen, and I am, to promote that dance. I mean, now I've done a little bit, and I have joined in some Zumba sort of stuff. That's more physically
Yeah.
demanding than probably some
Yeah.
other
Oh,
rugby
absolutely.
training
It
where I can
really is.
hide. Yeah, so I think it's definitely one of the missed opportunities. We do need this unified sort of story to tell, isn't it? It doesn't have to be
Mm,
very narrow, sort of gym based. It can be a whole series of exercise classes or working with individuals, or even just walking
totally.
groups. The amount of walking groups I see around here where people have started, sort of taking people out and their mental
Yeah.
health, another bit. So it's quite wide and varied, and hopefully that comes across in, like you say,
Yeah.
over 100 qualifications that you've got available for people. So
Definitely.
so can I just thank you for being with us, Jenny, this morning? It's absolutely fantastic. I do think it's important that we do talk about this, the support for the sector. And you're not hidden because I think, if I'm being really honest, I see Active IQ all over the place, and you've got a very strong brand, and also just thank you and the team behind you for probably just being very professional in the way of sort of dealing with this pamphlet and all the rest of it. It's just, you learn a lot about an organisation during this sort of process. Can I just say, top of the class really to you and Kerry and those in the team. Been fantastic, and I think that
Thank
comes
you. Yeah.
across professional
You did
approach.
some great
Yeah,
work on it. So yeah, thank you.
yeah. So it's very welcome. So thank you, and look forward to continue to work with you really to promote some of those things you've talked about today, and hopefully these manifesto ideas can start to get in front of policymakers and potential ministers over this coming months ahead of a general election, and hopefully we'll take it a bit more seriously, the development of our workforce. So hopefully being part of that journey, Jenny.
No, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the latest podcast. Hopefully you found it helpful and you've gained some insights from our guest. If you have enjoyed it today, it would be really helpful to hit the like button and subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. As always, feel free to pop over to any of our social media channels to comment or ask a question. Or sign up to our monthly newsletter at sportsthinktank.com. If you're interested in supporting our work at the Sports Think Tank, again, just head over to the website or drop me an email. Thanks, and see you again next time.